A disclaimer to begin. I share these words about Israel humbly, acknowledging obviously the range of opinions here in the room on the subject. Our relationship isn't dependent on whether we see the world similarly, but rather whether we speak respectfully when there is difference. Regardless of our agreement, please email in the coming days so that we can schedule coffee. I'm interested in hearing your views on Israel and how you came to them. Good Yantif. In the days after October 7th, Israeli poet Lital Kaplan wrote this piece entitled Home Front's Commands New Regulations for Small Talk That Is Now Permitted. The standard Ma Nishma, what's up, has been canceled. Instead, please use what's shaken up, what's beaten up, or what's blown up. When your friend accidentally asks, Ma shlomech, literally, how is your shalom, your peace, a reference now irrelevant to the point of rude, we must frown and respond, Ma milchamatcha, how is your war? And if you're thinking about answering with the standard response, I'm fine, those words are now forbidden by strict government order. We now say, everything is cracked, and the truthful ones answer, Hakol b'shever, everything is shattered, everything is shattered. October 7th. I'm struck that Israelis still refer to the shocking and horrific terrorist invasion by its Gregorian date. Israel typically orients itself to the Jewish calendar for remembrances. But October 7th resonates because of its Hebrew translation, Hashiv'a be'October. The Hebrew for seventh is practically indistinct from the word Shiva, the intense week of grieving following a loved one's burial. To invoke Hashiva be'October is to observe that we are all still sitting Shiva, collectively in shock and shattered as if it happened last week instead of last year. We're traumatized by the loss of 1,200 Israeli innocents, by the plight of the hostages, including the approximately 100 who remain in captivity, by the sexual assaults and mutilations committed by invading madmen, by ruthless rockets from Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, and their collective arch sponsor, Iran. We are heartsick, too, about the displacement of 60,000 Israelis still forced out of their homes because of the terror, the opening of a new front in Lebanon, and the realization that Israel is already at war with Iran or about to be. Moreover, as we discussed on Rosh Hashanah, we are blindsided by the wave of anti-Semitism here and around the world, and particularly by its hateful expression on our campuses. And most of all, we grieve that so many still take pleasure in killing Israeli Jews. Tonight, how might we begin to put our shattered selves back together? This is a lot. There are no easy answers, but there is Jewish wisdom we can draw on as we consider the path ahead. I continue to learn from Rabbi Hillel and his dictum from Pirkei Avot, crafted 2 millennia ago in the land of Israel. He said, If I am not for myself, who am I? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Those were his questions, and they are ours this evening. Im ein anili mili. If I'm not for myself, then who really am I? Hillel begins with our responsibility to ourselves, but selfhood isn't just about us as individuals. Selfhood is the identity and connection we share with those we are closest to, those most like us in the world. The nuclear families we're from, the ancestors we're descended from genetically or spiritually, our chosen family of partners and dear friends, our people. Hillel opens by reminding us of them and the obligations that we have to them. Family comes first because we know that during crisis, families must stick together. We can't expect the aid of others. Our first obligation is to show up for one another. Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh, the rabbis proclaimed. All Israel is responsible one for the other in order that we might survive. If I am not for the survival of myself and my people, who am I? This concern for the survival and safety of the Jewish people is the basis for our commitment to Zionism and the right of our people to a state of our own. Theodor Herzl articulated this foundational idea of Zionism in 1896, that the evil scourge of anti-Semitism will never die. He taught that the only way to defend against such hatred was to have a state of our own, so that there would be at least one safe haven for Jews in the world. I would put it this way. Israel's existence as a safe haven is a non-negotiable precondition of Jewishness in modernity. The survival of our people requires a Jewish state. But just as there's more than one way to be Jewish, there's more than one way to be a Zionist. Some make Aliyah and many don't. Some lovingly criticize Israel's government when we disagree with particular values or initiatives, just like we do domestically, and others don't. I myself find much of Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership to be repugnant. His continual undermining of a deal to release the hostages and his insistent alliance with right-wing extremists whose basic values are antithetical to my own are deeply, deeply problematic to me in this moment. And yet, I stand with Israel. I love Israel, and I'm grateful for what she represents. Decades ago, I learned that there's a department within Israel's military intelligence. Their responsibility is to keep a file on every Jewish community worldwide. They maintain updated logistical plans for emergency evacuation, akin to the famed Ethiopian airlifts, if God forbid a community ever needed it. Israel is our safe haven and embodies the ethos that Jews are responsible for one another. I am proud to be a Zionist. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And like Lital Kaplan, I am shattered. As we take stock of the grief-filled losses of last year, I stand with Israel, with Israelis and the Jewish people, because family comes first. But Hillel doesn't end there. He insisted that Torah also obligated us to those beyond our family. And so he continued, "Ukshe'ani la'atzmi ma'ani." If I am just for myself and my people, what kind of person does that make me? Yes, we stand in solidarity with our extended family, but there is something missing if we only stand with our people. In some Jewish communal spaces, particularly after October 7th, expressing concern for innocent Palestinians has been off limits. But Hillel reminds us that we are obligated outside our families as well. Our tradition derives that obligation from Genesis 1:26, which we read on Rosh Hashanah. There, the Torah proclaims that every human is created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Every human is to be treated with dignity and respect. Maybe you're sympathetic to that notion, but think it's irrelevant during war when Israel's safety remains threatened. Our tradition offers us wisdom on how to hold this tension, because our basic obligations to the other are not suspended during wartime. The author of the book of Proverbs notes, "If your enemy is hungry, give him bread. If he's thirsty, give him water." And 1,500 years ago, Rabbi Chama ben Rabbi Hanina responded to this verse by almost absurdly teaching, even when your enemy is actively coming to kill you, if he arrived in your house thirsty, the least that you can do is offer a crazed killer a chilled Pellegrino. That text doesn't have the status of Jewish law, but Judaism does maintain that it is a positive commandment to defend ourselves if someone comes to harm us. And just so there's no confusion, I strongly affirm Israel's right to defend and secure itself. But embedded in Rabbi Chama's statement is an important theological value, privileging radical kindness and a belief that that kindness can change the heart of an enemy into a friend. Both parts of Hillel's statement, the clause demanding solidarity with our family and the clause demanding that we see Palestinian innocents as human beings, both of these values make moral claims on us. As a Jew and a human being, I'm not just existentially bereft about the loss of 1,200 Israelis and the plight of the hostages. I'm also concerned about 40,000 Gazans that have died, including approximately 15,000 children. I hold Hamas responsible for all these losses. Their wanton terror forces Israel to defend itself, and their disgusting inhumanity impels them to use Gazan civilians as human shields. But even as I stand by Israel in its self-defense, I'm deeply concerned about the scale of suffering of Gazan innocents also. I wonder if you're surprised to hear about concern for Palestinians in the synagogue. To be honest, I'm self-conscious speaking these words out loud here. But our tradition insists that I shouldn't have to be, and you shouldn't have to be either. Hillel and the Jewish ethics that grew out of his statement demand that we concern ourselves both with the unconscionable, appalling deaths of Israelis and the grim, awful deaths of innocents who are not. Israel has a right, an existential obligation to robustly defend itself and secure its borders. I give thanks for the bravery of the citizen soldiers of the IDF, and I pray for their well-being. I mourn the tragic losses of Israel's soldiers since October 7th, and I rage with my Israeli friends that another generation of young people, peers and friends of my own children, who will soon be called to serve and sacrifice. I stand with my family and my people, because if I am not for myself, who am I? But if I am only for myself, what kind of person does that make me? Hillel blesses the virtue of making space for others. As I've taught in the past, the Talmud urges us to make for ourselves a heart of many rooms, containing the truth and story of our commitment to Israel and the truth and story of our commitment to Palestinian innocence. The work I'm proposing is impossibly complex and difficult. To hold these narratives simultaneously is overwhelming and emotionally taxing. I'm inspired by Elie Wiesel and his remarkable empathy for the German children of SS officers. Many of them sought Wiesel's counsel during the trips he made to Germany in his adulthood. He once said, "I had never before considered that it could be as painful to be the children of those who ran the camps as to be the child of those who died in them." Wiesel was empathetic to the innocents and gave his heart, time, and advice to them. Their parents committed heinous, unforgivable things, but the innocent children of those monsters were worthy of caring and concern. There are plenty of reasons why we might not be moved to shift our mindset. It feels too hard, because we're hurting so much, and because our ultimate vision of peaceful coexistence requires painful compromise. Nonetheless, the imperative is to start now, and that's why Hillel closes with the words, "Ve'im lo akshav ematai," if not now, then when? The time is now on Yom Kippur, when we confront the essence of who we were last year and who we wish to be in the year ahead. The time is now on this Day of Atonement to think deeply about the extent that we have been present for our people, our family in Israel, and the extent to which we have been concerned about Palestinian innocence as well. The time is now to remind ourselves of the Talmud's teaching, "Uvemakom she'ein anashim," which I will loosely translate as, in a moment like October 7th, marked by animalistic inhumanity, hishtadel lihyot ish, we respond to the most extreme inhumanity by being mensches, by behaving like humans ourselves and treating the ones we encounter the same. That is how we put ourselves back together in the face of shatteredness, by loving rather than hating, by hoping rather than giving in and giving up. I'll conclude with these words from a piece by my colleague, Rabbi Hannah Yerushalmi. During this moment, bring me the grief of my people, centuries born and centuries old, and let it inspire me to still love the world even when it is seared with loss. Bring me the courage to quiet my desperate need for answers by letting hearts touch hearts on some imagined coastal plain. Bring me the tentative hope in a room before a newborn's cry, and connect me to the frail, silvery thread that links me to the humanity of my neighbor. During this moment, though there are horrors all around, she writes, in spite of everything that directs me not, let the more loving one be me. Let the more loving ones be us. Ken yehi ratzon may this be God's will.